Hi, good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. We are here today to make sure that we are hearing the voices of folks who were excluded by the committee hearings. Today we are talking about Bill 23. This bill greatly impacts our greenbelt, our environment, and the ability of the people of Ontario to access affordable housing. The committee hearings did not include these incredible speakers who are going to actually talk about the issues that people of Ontario are facing, and we need to make sure that everyone in Ontario can hear the actual impacts of this bill. We are calling for this bill to be withdrawn. If Bill 23 is not withdrawn, this does not represent the end of a fight. This is only the beginning. We have already planned a day of action for December 3rd to call on the repeal of Bill 23 if it is passed before then. But, with everything said, I will start with a land acknowledgement. So I wish to acknowledge that the land that we are gathered on today and that many of us live in, so-called Toronto, is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as well as many other nations whose names we have lost because of the detrimental impacts of colonialism. We are here to talk about Bill 23. Bill 23 is a bill that disproportionately impacts Indigenous peoples. Indigenous folks are disproportionately represented in the unhoused and precariously housed population because they face the current and the generational colonial impacts of colonial violence. So, this bill will not be a step toward reconciliation at all. It's actually quite the opposite. This bill would be colonial violence in action. We, as settlers at this table, have a duty to make sure that we are fighting in solidarity with Indigenous folks so that they can actually be practicing self-determination and just so that they can have the things that they deserve to survive and to live freely on this land. So all this being said, I will get to the speakers very shortly, but I want to first start with a statement by Chief LaRocca. Wondering if folks have the statement prepared, or should I wait for the end for that statement? Sorry? We'll pull it up. No worries. Okay. Why don't we get started with our speakers then? We have a wonderful list of speakers. First, we have Alejandra Ruiz Valquez. Alejandra is an organizer at Acorn and has been for many years now. Acorn is an organization that's fighting for the rights of tenants. So Alejandra will talk about the impacts of Bill 23 on tenants in Ontario.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Actually, Acorn was invited for the consultations, but you're totally right. I was only few people who was invited on that day. We commented on that because it was unfair. So today I had the honor to represent 46,000 Ontarians, members of Acorn. Acorn is an organization that is a tenant union for low-income and moderate-income people. We and other groups have fought for almost 2 decades about affordable housing issues, rent tenancy issues, loopholes in the Rent Tenancy Act, and licensing landlords, and about 1 decade for inclusionary zoning. So today we are here because we are extremely concerned about what is this law intended to do to tenants in Ontario. Because tenants right now are in an extreme position, choosing to pay rent or to buy food. And in total that, this government has decided to take more from us, and at the same time leaving us more unprotected than what we really are right now. So this bill doesn't really work for the people. This government has said that it's going to work for the people, but really tenants are not the people that they are working for. So the other point that is very problematic with this government is that we feel that the government sent us like missiles with this law because it's attacking so many issues that we have been fighting for years, and now they want even to put it worse. So we feel like, how are we going to tackle all this? So this is why it's so important that we all together are here trying to tell the government that what they are doing is wrong, because the happiness of few cannot be the misery of thousands. So the Bill 23 actually goes further and passes limited municipalities to require affordability to a maximum 5%. When we won in 2018 inclusionary zoning, we won 16% of the affordable units that are going to be built across Toronto. And now this government wants only 5%. So how many units are we going to lose? So the other thing that is very problematic for us is the rental replacement by law. You know, right now in Ottawa, we have few members of ACORN. And when I say few, it's because these are the ones who reach out about this issue. But there are others in other municipalities that have been reached for the same issue. In 2019, they received about the guideline increase. And because the landlord board tenant was so busy, they wasn't able to approve it. So now they're receiving a bill for $3,000 because 2019, 2020, until now. This is unacceptable. And this is going to create, this Bill 23 is going to create more problems for us as a tenants. And of course, there's going to be a red carpet open for developers. Because they're going to replace these old buildings that are already there that they want to redevelop. So the other piece that is very important is we were, Toronto, Ottawa, Hamilton, we were in the process to implement new laws for protection for tenants, but with this law, it's going to be vanished. And I think so the last point that is very important for us is that the government is going to take the charges when developers construct or build. And so these fees were used for affordable housing. So how really are going to do more projects with affordable housing? What is the social housing? What is the co-ops? What is the other type of housing that people need, like supported housing? And I think so I will have more time, that I have more time to speak, or I can stop now.
I think we have maybe 1 more minute.
1 more minute. So, and the other piece that I think so should be worried to every Ontarian is the piece that the OLT, the Ontario Land Tribunal, only few people can go there. No, it's not open to the public. So where is democracy going? We should be scared. Everybody in this province should be scared because I don't know you guys, but I immigrate here. And I immigrate because this was a democracy, a country that I can speak about what I believe, what I think. And now I am going to put a tape. I don't like it. This is not what I teach to my child. And I don't think so this is what you want to teach your child. And I'm telling you that we feel that every time we receive a paper under the door, you know what is happening? We feel that this is a bomb. So Syria received bombs, but we received paper bombs. And we cannot continue with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandra. The government claims that they need to pass this bill in order to increase the supply of affordable housing, but this is not the case at all. So thank you, Alejandra, for speaking on these issues. I'd like now to read a statement by Chief LaRocca, Chief Kelly LaRocca of the Scugog First Nation, who has also put out a statement for Bill 23. Unfortunately, they could not be here today, so I will just read their words. The Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation wishes to express our profound concern with the More Homes Built Faster Act and the government's approach to housing policy. While we recognize the need to increase housing supply in Ontario, development cannot disregard due process, skip informed consultations, or run roughshod over environmental protections. It's crucial that we do not pursue short-term solutions with long-term harms. As noted in our submissions to the Standing Committee on Heritage, Infrastructure, and Cultural Policy, our First Nation is calling on the province to reconsider many elements of its legislation and pursue a thoughtful approach to housing supply. Weakening wetland protections, reducing the power of conservation authorities, and meddling with our long-standing processes are not needed to build housing. They simply undermine our democracy and place the environment at risk of permanent damage. We urge the government to listen to its constituents and pause further progress on this legislation until informed consultation has taken place and concerning elements of the bill have been addressed. So we thank Chief LaRocca for issuing the statement and sending it to us. I also want to direct folks' attention to the Chiefs of Ontario, who have also issued a public statement regarding Bill 23. You can find that on their website. I believe it's chiefs-of-ontario.org. With that, let's move on to the rest of our panel. I would like to now introduce the former Ajax Mayor, Steve Parrish, who will speak on the implications of Bill 23 on municipalities.
Thank you very much. I was mayor of the town of Ajax from 1995 to 2018 when I decided to retire, and I thought at that point that everything was fine and I could just retire. But these latest developments have brought me out of retirement, and I've been asked to speak today because, incredible as it is, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and the Large Urban Municipalities Conference of Ontario has not had the ability to comment on this bill and related amendments. The front line of providing housing in Ontario are municipalities. They have the expertise, they have the background, they've been doing it for decades, and to not consult with individual municipalities and municipal groups is frankly shocking. I just want to talk about a few aspects of this legislative package. I'll start with the Greenbelt, which has justifiably gotten a very high profile in this thing. And I won't dwell on the Premier's promise not to touch the Greenbelt. I think everybody knows about that. But I will dwell on his attempt to be excused from his promise on the basis that there is a housing emergency. Now, first question is, did this housing emergency just happen in the last few months? Or did it not exist 2 years ago when he promised that, and 2 years prior to that when he promised not to touch the Greenbelt? Secondly, his own task force and everybody who has any sophisticated knowledge of this knows and has said on the record, this is not an issue of quantity of urban lands. This is how you use them. So his own advisors have said you don't need any more urban land. In fact, the regional municipalities in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area are just completing their long-range comprehensive reviews, which have set aside urban lands beyond a time frame of 2051, 30 years out. So the excuse to go into the Greenbelt is a false excuse. It's a lie originally, not to touch the Greenbelt, compounded by another lie. And now it's been compounded by a third lie when the Premier says, I'm taking land out of the Greenbelt, but I'm compensating by putting more land in. Well, a huge amount of this land is urban river valleys, which cannot be developed in any event. I mean, we shouldn't be lied to, and we shouldn't be treated like idiots. The second thing I want to talk about is conservation authorities and the fact that this bill guts the very important role in conservation authorities in policing, planning, and protecting our environment. For the past 70 years, approximately, we've lived in a province that has conservation authorities. And many of us, including myself, just under the wire, can't remember a time when we didn't have conservation authorities. And so, we're living in this place that doesn't know what it's like if you don't have conservation authorities, which were brought on by Hurricane Hazel in 1954, which decimated all the places around here, all the river valleys are here, flooded, property damage, lives lost. And now we're in an era where climate change is much more severe in its impacts than it was 70 years ago. And we're taking all the regulatory powers away from conservation authorities. I'll give you one example. In Durham Region, the Toronto Region Conservation Authority did a watershed plan on Crothers Creek. and said that if the headwaters of those creeks is developed, it'll have severe flooding consequences and should not go ahead unless there's a rigorous system of regulations and buffers, et cetera, et cetera. The developer is now proceeding to go ahead with that development, it appears, and the COP is no longer on the street, and it will not be developed properly, and there will be major flooding risks in the Crothers River Valley. The third thing I want to talk about is, the government is trying to solve the housing problem partially by taking away development charges and a parkland dedication and related authorities from municipalities. Development charges are the major financial building block which funds infrastructure. You cannot have new housing without infrastructure. Toronto estimates $200 million a year hit. My municipality of Ajax, a much smaller municipality than Toronto, $2 million a year hit. Province-wide, it's safe to say it's well in excess of $1 billion per year being taken out of the financial resources to build this infrastructure. What are the implications of that? There's two possibilities, and only two. The infrastructure won't get built, and our quality of life will go down, and we won't be able to build more housing, or if we do, it'll be substandard housing. Or we still build that infrastructure, and it will be paid for by the existing property taxpayer with an ordinate property tax rate increases. Third thing I want to talk about is this bill proposes to strip upper-tier municipalities in the Greater Toronto Area from their planning authority. Now, I just want to briefly give you the implications of that. Regions like Durham do long-range planning, and on the basis of that long-range planning, they plan what infrastructure is needed, and then they set their development charges and raise those development charges on that basis. If you separate the planning authority from the infrastructure building and infrastructure financing, what happens? Is this going to further the building of new housing? There's no way it is. There's no way it is. The other thing I want to say is that this is a very large and complex bill. It's already been illustrated by other speakers. I'm convinced that it wasn't drafted over the weekend on a napkin. I'm convinced that it was drafted through months and months of lobbying and consultation and actual drafting by the developers and their paid planners and lawyers. These type of bills are very complex. They're not done. So, in effect, what I'm saying, sometime between God knows when and October, the development industry had months and months to consult with this government and draft this legislation. And now they're bringing forward this legislation and asking for a consultation period at a time between when existing councils are going out of office and new councils haven't yet been sworn in. The Council of the Town of Ajax isn't even sworn in until this evening. So a commentary period that seems like brief, 30 days or something, is really not 30 days at all, because the outgoing council can't comment on it, and the new council are not in place yet. So, the most shocking thing about this is the brief, non-existent consultation period. This deserves real, significant input from municipalities, from all these other organizations. It's complex, full consultation, and I echo what was said earlier. This government needs to put this on pause, give it a real consultation period. I would suggest 90 days, and let's have a full discussion. There are things that can do to improve the housing situation in this province. But Bill 23, encroaching on the Greenbelt, and all these initiatives do not do it. In fact, I think they take us backwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We will now turn to Dr. Mili Roy. Dr. Roy is the chair of the Ontario chapter of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, and she is also the co-chair of the Ontario Climate Emergency Campaign. Dr. Mili will be speaking on the health impacts of Bill 23. Please.
Thanks very much, Chloe. As a physician, I'm deeply concerned that Bill 23 has the potential to unleash far-reaching public health harms for generations to come. As a housing bill, we must recognize that housing is an essential social determinant of health. Affordable housing interventions can actually improve health outcomes and cut healthcare costs. This bill effectively guts affordable housing, as we've already heard. Compared to sustainable urban planning, it will deliver a smaller supply of larger, more expensive homes by promoting suburban sprawl with negative public health and cost impacts. While record numbers of Ontarians are flocking to food banks this year, Bill 23 further threatens Ontario farmers' crops by destroying precious farmland and worsening climate change. Food security is another essential determinant of health. Bill 23 will also promote car-dependent communities and lifestyles. This decreases physical activity and erodes mental health while promoting obesity, diabetes, heart and lung disease, each with their own healthcare costs attached. And selling off the Greenbelt. Selling off Greenbelt land under Bill 23 will sell out the future of Ontarians, carrying huge health risks as well. These lands function as natural carbon sinks. They are not an untapped monetary asset waiting for the highest bidder or a scenic indulgence. Their destruction will worsen the climate crisis. The Greenbelt land is critical to public health and our survival, and we need to learn to recognize them as such. Access to nature has been proven to actually improve the risk of stroke, heart disease, high blood pressure, and asthma. It improves mental health and actually increases our lifespans. Building over more land will also increase heat islands and flooding risks. And of greatest concern, perhaps, is that both air pollution and climate crisis will be escalated under Bill 23 by increased motor vehicle and home natural gas emissions in sprawl communities, while undermining critical municipal green standards. Air pollution prematurely kills nearly 7,000 Ontarians every year already and causes many diseases ranging from asthma, heart attacks, and dementia to cancer, diabetes, and birth defects. Even worse, the climate crisis represents the single greatest human health crisis of our time. The UN panel on climate change stated just this year that any further delay in action will miss a rapidly closing window to secure a livable future. We are talking about a livable future, and we need the government on board. Additionally, Bill 23 will hurt the health of our economy and democracy. Sprawl development costs the public more than double of sustainable densification within cities. Ontario already loses over $49 billion every year to air pollution and will lose billions more to uncontrolled climate change. Bill 23 may trigger massive tax hikes, as we heard from Mayor Parrish, and a potential crisis of insurability for homeowners, especially with the loss of conservation authorities and the flood protections they have provided. Furthermore, the bill cripples the conservation authorities, municipalities, expert and citizen input, hurting our democracy. In closing, we urge the Government of Ontario to halt this bill and proceed instead with the excellent sustainable solutions already put forward by many municipalities and expert urban planners. If our call today is disregarded and Bill 23 is passed, Ontarians will not step down. We cannot step down as the future of our children and loved ones remain under threat. Nous demandons au gouvernement de l'Ontario d'arrêter ce projet de loi. Suivre plutôt les solutions durables déjà créées par les municipalités et les urbanistes experts. Si notre appel d'aujourd'hui est ignoré pour adopter le projet de loi 23, les Ontariens vont continuer à s'opposer tant que l'avenir de nos enfants et de nos familles restera menacé. We are calling for coordinated days of action December 3rd and 4th across the province. There is a demonstration today in front of Michael Ford's office at 12:30. We invite every Ontarian to rally together to protect all that we value most. There's never been more at stake. The ways in which we use our land, move, eat, and live over just the next few years will ultimately determine our chances for a healthy, livable future for all. Thank you. And with that, I will hand back to Chloe for any question and answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. We now have about 5 minutes for questions, if anyone has any.
Steve, do you have any evidence to back up the idea that this bill was drafted by developers? Or can you explain that, why you think that in a little more detail?
Well, first of all, it's just a matter of connecting the dots. To my knowledge, there was no consultation at any time between the government and municipalities and municipal organizations, and no warning about the introduction of this bill. It's quite common that at the staff level at least, and at the political level, there is knowledge when this type of legislation is coming forward, and there is consultation, and there's heads up, and there's, press releases and other things that go with that. It is an omnibus bill that consists of amendments to a large number of statutes. As I said, you don't do this quickly over the weekend. It clearly took months and months to be drafted. There's only one other group that government bureaucrats could be working with in the drafting of this, and that's the planners and lawyers of the development industry. We know that, Peter Van Loan was lobbying extensively on behalf of the development industry. We have this history of developers buying land at certain prices within months of the introduction of this legislation. We know that if you go through the individual pieces of legislation that are amended, it is literally a checklist of the wants of the development industry going back to the days of the McGuinty government. It just checks all the boxes, even with respect to development charges, conservation authorities, all down the list. So what evidence do I have? Do I have a memo that says, here's the draft that we've done for you, Mr. Ford, please introduce it in the legislature? No, but you do not have to be a rocket scientist to connect the dots, and all the dots lead to one and one conclusion only, that they were heavily consulted and that they basically wrote it.
Do you think what's happened here is corruption?
I think, I'm going to give you one example in answering that question. The Durham Rouge Agricultural Preserve. That land was divested from the province when the province decided that it wasn't going, when the airport was on pause, et cetera, and the land that was expropriated around the airport back in the early 70s was reconveyed to individual owners on the condition that there were agricultural easements, conservation easements on that land. And because of those easements, those lands were conveyed back to owners for agricultural prices, $5,000 to $10,000 an acre. We know from very thorough investigative reporting by several newspapers that the bill, the omnibus bill, contains, or a supplement to it, contains legislation to revoke those agricultural easements. We also know that several developers, prominently the de Gasperis family, has purchased many parcels in the Durham Reach Agricultural Preserve, some quite recently for fairly large sums of money. Here's those purchases taking place in the last few months or in the fairly recent past, and then this legislation introduced now, and the moment that bill's passed, that land goes up in value astronomically. So if that's not corruption, if that's not undue influence, if that's not private interest trumping the public interest, I don't know what is.
Any other perspectives on that same question?
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. Well, I will say that inclusionary zoning, Cherry and always start in 2005 with this law, and then we came to a picture in 2015, meaning ACORN, and then other organizations. So it took since 2005 until 2018 to craft this bill. And now in less than 6 months, they say this bill don't go that way, now go this way. So think about it. And yeah, probably this is my comment to that. And I think so we are right now speaking about housing in a corrupted policy, because we know the answer, we have the solutions, we have the money, but we don't have the will. So this is corruption for me. Thank you.
I'd love to ask more, but I have to go to question period. And since I'm the only one here, I think that's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. And
Thank you so
attending.
much. You did a great job.
All right.
Everybody.
This
Thank you.
concludes our press conference.
Amazing. Thank you.